Welcome back to the Show My Scars podcast. I'm your host, Derek Duker. Today's episode is a great one. I've always been a fan of comedy and humor, and as you'll hear in this conversation with my guest, I feel like the earliest stages of my life were greatly shaped by comedians such as Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, Adam Sandler, and Chris Farley, among others. As my friends and teachers could attest, I've always been the one to try to elicit laughter. Making others laugh provides me with a great level of joy that I can rarely get otherwise. That's why my guest today and what she offers the world intrigues me greatly. Barbara Michaels, the Jester of the piece, offers a creative performance art installation called Humorville, in which she combines intimacy, comedy, wisdom, and change to ignite insight within you. I'll let her explain how she does that in the interview. So here's my conversation now with Barbara Michaels. I just want to thank you again for agreeing to come on the show. I'm super interested in what you're doing. I'm a former class clown that's pretty much never grown out of that, so humor's always been a huge part of my life. And I've always been interested in, I know how it affects me mentally. So I've always been a big proponent of humor to help people get out of the poor moods that they're in. But I really want to start in how you got interested in performance art in the beginning. I know we talked a little bit about that on the phone, but I think it's a pretty cool story. So what was the first memory you have of wanting to do something in performance?
I was a dramatic child. Partly part of the reason I was dramatic. I mean, that doesn't mean that I was having tantrums all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But I had a super active imagination, and part of the reason for that is that I was an only child. And so when you're an only child, you end up playing a lot of games with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would play Scrabble with myself. And can you imagine how humorous it is
gosh.
to play cards with yourself, because somebody has to win and you know what all the cards are. It's just, it's like omniscience. It's so funny. But one of the things that being an only child creates is a really rich internal life. And I had lots of dolls to play with and was making up stories all the time. And I think that the process of being my own friend caused me to also really get comfortable in the creative life. Mm-hmm. Because that's what it is when you have to be your own friend. And it's not that I didn't have friends. I have friends in the neighborhood, but when you're in your house and you're an only child, a bunch of the time you have to entertain yourself. And so there's an inherent creativity and also a thoughtfulness and also a depth that goes along with that, because you really have a lot of time to examine your own thoughts. Yeah. Whether you realize as a child that you're examining your own thoughts is another matter, but you're doing it. And so then my mom took me to this theater program called Creative Theater Unlimited in Princeton, New Jersey, which was about less than an hour from where we were living. And in this program, they would read us a story and then take away all of the characters' names, all of the lines. They would take away all of the where it was, when it was, and leave us with the bare bones of this tale. And then we would retell the story. We'd add our own characters and our own lines and our own how are we going to tell this story, this storyline. And I realized at least 20 years later that my entire art career is based on improvising on a structure. And this was before I studied improvisation. And I studied comedy improv, I studied clown theater. Those two things are really central to what my work is about. But even predating that, Creative Theater Unlimited taught me to create on a structure. And I do that to this day. Every artwork I have is an improvisation on a structure.
Yeah, that sounds a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah. Yep. And then I went on from there. I'd always loved dance. I remember proudly one of my girlfriends and I in high school won uh, a spiritual center was having a dance off, and she and I won, and I was so proud. But I'd always loved moving, and so I started to study improv, and then I went to a mime class at the Celebration Barn in South Paris, Maine, and which is a phenomenal place. It's started by Tony Montanaro, who studied with Marcel Marceau, and his wife Karen, who's a dancer. And I loved it. I loved mime. I loved being able to have all of that expression, all of that physical expression so clarified, because I've heard various metrics on this, but it's something like 80% of communication is nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
And so to become an absolutely excellent physical communicator is extremely powerful and really underappreciated. So then I went back the next year and I took a clown class. I thought, okay, I really like it up here at the Celebration Barn. And I love the sense of community. And I am really into these physicalized art forms and performance art. So I went and took a clown class, and I was I was a horrible clown. I was so unfunny. I was so lost. And I had been a smart kid. I think part of the reason for that is spending a lot of time with my own thoughts, right, as we shared, but I'd been a smart kid. And so when you're a smart kid, having the answer is really important, especially if you get accepted and appreciated when you have the answer. And if you don't have the answer, things are not so good. So there I was in this clown class with my life educational frame of having the answer, really not having the answer. I was trying to make jokes about diseases. I was super awkward. My toes were trembling. It was just totally absurd. And I since I couldn't process failure in that way, I just couldn't process it. It was like, if you're having this much failure, the world's going to end. The world's really not going to end, but in the system of approval and disapproval that I had, the world ends if you don't have the answer at that level. So my teacher, and this was Julie Goel, who's the partner of Avner Eisenberg. Julie Goel is passed away now. Avner was the first clown of a Broadway show. It's pretty cool. And she just came over to me. I crashed onto the floor sobbing. I was so distraught that I couldn't navigate the situation, and it meant something to me. I was trying, because I have a theory that clown chooses you. And so I was trying to answer the call and doing it so ineffectively. And she just sat down next to me, put my little sobby, cryy head on her lap, stroked my hair, looked in my face. I couldn't see her because I had tears in my eyes. But I was able to distill the fact that she was smiling at me totally broadly. And I realized that she was celebrating me for complete and total failure and loving me for complete and total failure. And that was a pivotal moment, because from then on, I felt like, what? I'm being celebrated and loved and adored and championed for being a mess right now, for real failure, for having tried so hard that I just lost my marbles, literally. And that changed me. I devoted myself from that moment to finding humor in the human condition, because people do hold themselves back if they don't process failure well. Right. People do hold themselves back if something difficult happens, and they make a decision that whatever that is dangerous. Like if I had decided, oh, I'm bad at this, being a clown is dangerous, I'm never going to clown again, or I can't find success here, I'm going to stop trying. Or if I had gotten in my car and driven away being like, okay, that's not for me, I wouldn't have a 30-year career. I wouldn't have clown in my heart as a spiritual practice. I wouldn't have humor as the harbinger of healing. I wouldn't have any of that. But if I had made any of those other decisions. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to her for being the messenger of that. We're all the messenger for somebody, for something. And she was the messenger to me of emotional freedom and celebration of the things that go wrong, because there's a gift in it.
How did you take that, and then those feelings and what she was able to do for you in that moment? How did you take that and then continue on?
So the first part of that is that this is probably 30 years ago now. Um, the second part of it is that once the heart is changed, the heart is changed. Like you can't unsee and unfeel being truly loved and accepted. And you're in a crazy moment. The heart can't unfeel that.
Right.
And so one of the things I say now with the work that I do often is, may you walk with humor. And that was the moment that I started walking with humor. Now, it's not the first moment that I ever walked with humor, but it was the first time I walked with humor intentionally, because I had always looked to humor to connect with my family. When people are in a small family, then finding ways to connect is extra important because there's fewer people to connect with. And so I found that humor was a way that I could find my family members when sometimes people are hard to find, and so I could find them through humor.
Yeah,
And
that's one of the first memories as a child. And I was thinking about this before we hopped on, like a lot of my behaviors and my humor come from those early 90s comedy movies, and like Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, Robin Williams, all those guys. I feel like I almost tried to be them several times in my life. Is that those were the movies that we grew up watching, and like you were saying, with my family, all of us sitting there, and we would go back when movie rental places were a thing. We'd go out, pick up a couple of those movies, go grab a gallon of ice cream and make some peanut butter shakes, and all sit around the TV and just laugh our heads off at these guys. And what that did for us as a family, we were kind of a chaotic household. There's 4 of us brothers, so there was always, sibling rivalries and fights and things. But those movies really did bring us together and gave us an ability to talk on a level that I don't think would have been possible without them.
Yeah, because humor lowers our defenses.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that I use humor as a strategy artistically is that humor helps us have conversations that are hard to have. It helps us reframe the past. It helps us release tension in the moment. It's really one of the most powerful human connectors and underappreciated. As I was saying earlier, I have found that humor, art, and love are the fastest reconnectors of the human spirit. And so if I've ever felt distracted, dissociated, unclear, mournful, spun out, lost, anytime I felt any of those things, I can reliably say that humor, art, and love has brought me back to connection every time. And because of that, I represent humor, art, and love as a life path or a spiritual practice or an art form, simply a way of being, and to reclaim each of those things as native to our hearts. Because one of the things that happens with humor is that it gets stuck in the comedy industry, the wonderful comedy industry that you were just talking about, which has so many gifts. I mean, we need a comedy industry. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I have people say to me, I'm not funny. I'm not a comedian. Well, if you're not allowed to be funny unless you're a professional comedian on the stage, that just impedes wellness. Humor is a part of every day. Humor is the way that is a way to navigate life. And when I say that, I'm really talking about humor as a human right. Because if we're creating a world that only some people are allowed to be happy in, if you have these qualities that have been told to us are the qualities to have in order that a person can be happy, well, that also impedes well-being. And humor is human. Humor is not the domain of the happy people. Humor is human for all people.
Yeah, and as you were talking there, I was thinking of one of my best friends. Whenever I'm having a hard time, I feel like our discussion always starts with some sort of humor. I'll downplay my situation with humor to open the conversation with him. And then, yeah, that kind of is where the healing starts, whether it be the joke itself or how that just sparks the conversation.
Yeah, you feel safer with each other once you laugh with each other. And this is one of the most important things about humor, because humor can also be used to hurt people.
Mm.
If you think about children on a playground laughing at each other, it's incredibly painful. And there's a real difference. If I take on the idea that they're laughing at me, I'm an adult right now. If I say I'm laughing, they're laughing at me. Even sitting here talking to you on this podcast, I say I am. They're laughing at me. It hurts even in a sentence.
Mm.
There's a sting in it, even saying in a sentence, even though it's not happening. If I go to, they're laughing with me. I feel an expansion in my heart. I feel a clarity in my mind. I feel my eyes open. I feel them brighten. It's like they're laughing with me. It's very powerful to teach about and watch people absorb the difference between laughing at each other and laughing with each other. And it's not that laughing at is never the right thing. Every once in a while, from like a Jester perspective, where somebody really needs to get called out, it is possible. However, laughing with is where the love gets created. And so if we as a world trend laughing with, or if we see laughing at situations, if we can flip it to laughing with each other instead, then that creates people feeling celebrated and seen and known and connected.
How much research have you done on the mental health benefits of humor? Maybe on, I know obviously it releases endorphins and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like there really is, like, I can almost feel it in my brain, like break me out of a depression sometimes.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You are actually feeling it in your brain. I haven't done the research myself because I don't have to, because other people already did it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of studies. If you look up studies on play, studies on humor, even just doing a regular internet search, dozens of, if not, I don't know how many, but maybe even hundreds of studies have been done. I'm sure it's in the hundreds now, about the role of laughter and healing, about the role of humor and wellness, about the effect of play and laughter on the body, about the effect of play and laughter on the mind. It's a very well researched area. And so it's easy to find the research. And I really encourage people who love research to go look at it, because it's also ancient. I didn't invent humor for wellness. It's our hearts and minds are designed to reach for humor for wellness. That's what humor is for. I have a concept that I often speak about, especially when I'm doing my Circus of the Heart project, which is a library of stories that were hard then that are funny now, told by people from around the world of different ages and all different kinds of people. But something difficult happens. If we say the human condition, like what is the human condition? People will often talk about something stressful. The human condition looks like a big squiggle. It's up and down and sideways and all over the place. So something difficult happens, the human condition, and then it's too soon to find laughter with that situation. And too soon is that comedy industry term that means we're not ready for humor. But how interesting is that the phrase is too soon, meaning that the time will come.
Right. Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. It feels like whenever you watch some of the stand-up specials and you hear them bring up past events in the country or whatever in society, yeah, you hear that phrase sometimes, too soon, but I feel like sometimes it opens the dialogue for those things to help us move through them.
Yes, it's too soon, too soon, too soon. And then what I call the first laugh happens. And the first laugh could be any size. It could be so tiny. I often talk about it like this. It could be even smaller. It could be like, the smallest little laugh. But with that first little, it could even be a smile in the heart. It could even be the turn up of one iota of the lip only on the left side. Whatever it is, that's the moment where we put space around the pain for the heart for the first time, where the heart has hope that healing is actually going to be underway. And then that story starts to cook. We may not find full laughter with it right away. The healing journey could be very long. At least we know it's happening, because before the first laugh, the story owns us emotionally. And then we have even one little, like a door that's cracked open, a molecule is still cracked open. And so then the story cooks and cooks and cooks. And then we reach what I call the humor condition, which is when any story from our lives has reached the point where these are the physical metrics. We have fun telling the story. Our face might brighten. We might smile or laugh. We feel better. And telling the story gives us energy. When that happens, we can be altruistic with the story. Now, it's very important to say that not every story in our lives will find humor in our lifetime. And I often will put my hand on my heart and say, this is for the stories that won't find humor in our lifetime. And it could be generations, and some of those stories may find humor. An example of this is that war is terrible all the time. All the time. Every moment of war is terrible. And you would never think anyone could find humor about that because it's basically a human crisis that this is happening. However, how many funny movies are there about war? How many jokes about war? How many people had to find a way to find humor? And it's not that the original thing is funny. War is not funny. I've had people tell me funny stories about death of parents, almost drowning as a child, cancer surgery in their brain, breaking both legs, being not trying to figure out how to have kids, just really serious stuff. Guns, just everything. And the original story, the original thing isn't funny, but something along the journey finds humor. And when that happens, when you get the first laugh, that's when freedom starts. And if we can really get to a point with any story of our lives that we can laugh fully with it and feel better, knowing that the original thing isn't funny, that it's an aspect, then we can help other people. And that's where humor goes full circle. Because when we can be altruistic, because we're telling people our it's funny now stories, it's very, very powerful. It's like, oh, well, if she can do that, what can I do?
You've started a business called Humorville. What was the first Humorville space? I guess before we talk about that, how did Humorville come about?
Humorville came about before I realized that Humorville came about, which I think is funny. So I was a wedding officiant. I've done basically every kind of audience interactive job that could exist. I mean, maybe not all of them, but many, many. I've been a tour guide, a wedding officiant, I've done one-woman shows. I've been an educator. I've been a keynoter. I've been a stilt walker. I've been a festival performer, just any kind of audience participatory. That's been my work life. And I was a wedding officiant for 10 years in New York City. I won awards. Thank you. And that's where I got the name Jester of the Peace, because my very dear friend Michael said to me, "Oh, you're a clown, and now you're doing weddings as you're a minister. Well, you should be the Jester of the Peace." And I said, "You are right. I should be." And so I kept that. And when I first started being a wedding officiant, calling myself Jester of the Peace, I actually had some pushback. And people would say, I remember one gentleman in particular, he said, "You can't call yourself that. That's not serious." But this is the thing. Jester of the Peace became my radio signal for people who needed to express their creativity to feel authentic. Because there's this continuum in the wedding industry. People need their tradition to feel real, or people need their creativity to feel real, or both. And that whole continuum is completely equal. It's just where is somebody? And so there's not as many officiants who are willing to do costume weddings, helicopter weddings, whatever I was willing to do, because creativity is that sacred to me. And that's why I went to Interfaith Seminary, because I was an internet minister doing costume weddings, afraid that no one would take my clients seriously if I was an internet minister doing costume weddings. And I wanted them to be deeply respected, because that's where creativity lives for me as one of the most sacred things on earth. So I became an interfaith minister. I'm not a member of any particular faith, but I'm a legal clergy person. And now that ties into art, love, and humor as a spiritual practice and what I feel called to do there. But so you asked me, where did Humorville start? I just started marrying people to each other and themselves in the street. I started going, whatever I've done, I've made it into art. When I went to art school as a performance artist, and I had a studio full of stuff. And this is in the late 90s. I didn't have anything to do with my stuff because I was a performance artist. So I stuck it all in my car. And I made an art car, which is like a 2,000-pound costume. And that was an audience interactive. So here I am, a wedding officiant. And I went out and started marrying people to themselves. And I had a photographer marry his camera. I had a little boy marry his favorite dinosaur. A woman married her creativity. I would have work colleagues be like, "You mean so much to me. I want to have you have my back. I want to do this ceremony and just honor who you are to me." This is all in the street. And then I had a marriage bureau. And then I had a voting booth during an election year, and I went out and voted for people to be president of whatever they want in the street. And so it was, if people needed to be taken seriously, they'd be like, I'm the president of free food for children. And then they'd, stand up straight. And then other people would be like, I am the president of naps and snacks, because they needed a humorous moment. Because all the projects, because they're improvisations on a structure, thank you, Creative Theater Unlimited, right? I meet people wherever they are emotionally. So if someone needs to be seen seriously, they're going to choose a serious presidency. If they need to be seen, if they need a laugh right now, they're going to choose that. Either way, they feel seen, heard, and celebrated and walk away uplifted. So, and then I ended up making almost 365 humorous personal growth holidays. And I started a library of stories that were hard then that are funny now that I was talking about earlier. And there's a parade. And then after 10 years or so, I looked and I said, hold up. I made a marriage bureau and a voting booth and a library and a parade and holidays and a vital records office and a newsroom. This is a town. This is a town. Whoa. It was really like a wait, what, whoa kind of a moment. And then I thought, oh, well, I've been given a town. So clearly I need to tour this town. So one of the fun things about this is that I've already toured all of the parts. I've already done all of the parts. I already know that they all work because they were created as one-offs, or in some cases doing them many years, like the Love Letter Lounge post office I've been doing for 10 years. People clear their hearts or cheer their hearts. So now it's about, okay, let me tour this as a town. Let me do a multi-room installation. First floor, go in the marriage bureau, marry yourself. Second floor, go vote yourself president. Third floor, go to the library and record your It's Funny Now story. Come out, feel seen, heard, and celebrated. Go with your family group, go with your work group, go with your spiritual group, go with your friends, go by yourself, go on a date, be known. Because a big part of wellness is being seen, heard, and celebrated, because seen and heard isn't enough. It's possible to be seen and heard and rejected, which is, this is one of my theories about why some people choose violence as a solution, because they feel seen and heard and rejected. But seen, heard, celebrated, this is the difference between laughing at and laughing with. When people feel known and celebrated, they make better decisions for themselves and each other. So I'm actually a really serious artist. I use humor as a strategy because it's phenomenally faster.
This episode of the Show My Scars podcast is brought to you by Two Oddballs Creative. They're your guide to epic websites, storied brands, and rockstar PR. They're trusted by such brands as the City of Joplin, Missouri, the Stratford Sports Center, Club Blue of Springfield, Missouri, Advanced Concrete Technology, among others. Head on over to 2oddballs.com, that's the number 2, oddballs.com, to see what services they offer. They also have a blog on there with lots of great free information, such as types of video content that's helpful for businesses, why local partnerships matter to your brand's growth, and many other articles that are sure to be helpful to you and your business. So check it out over at the number 2, oddballs.com. Or if you're ready to chat with them, you can give them a call at 417-986-6332. What are some of the best reactions or experiences that you've seen in Humorville?
Oh my gosh. Did you really just ask me that? There's so many. It's just, I mean, some of the things that, I'll just tell you some of the first ones that stand out in my mind. I was doing I Vote for You in Central Park in New York City. And this woman walked up to me and we did the project, and she said, "I'm the president of all children in wheelchairs." And then I would say within about 30 seconds, she was crying on my shoulder. And I just hugged her. I'm like, yeah, yes, you are. And what are you going to do when you get into office? And what does this mean to you? And what can people expect from you for the next 4 years? And she had answers to all of those things. And it was like she needed to be received in her depth of feeling about this. And one of the things about my projects is that if people are ready to be received, they will be. And sometimes people use my projects for purposes of transformation. Like I was doing the Marriage Bureau. I was doing Jester of the Peace at an art gallery at Susan Illy Fine Art. And she had commissioned me it was a show about fairy tales, and she had commissioned me to marry people to their version of happily ever after. And this gentleman came in, and dad of a bunch of kids, back and forth between Long Island and New York, worked in professional field, hadn't painted in 35 years. So he made a commitment in that moment to marry his return to painting after 35 years. And oddly, or by fate, there was another person in the room who knew him 35 years ago. And every time he sees me, he needs to show me what's going on in his studio. He's like, look, this is what's happening in my studio. This is what I'm painting right now. This is the show that I'm in right now, because I've come to represent for him one of his greatest commitments, which is one of his greatest loves of his life, which is painting. And so it's like the commitment people want to make is cooking inside of them. And if they come across me when they're ready, they can use a 5-minute experience to do a full-on transformation in their life, because they've been ready. And then being seen, heard, and celebrated can help make the change. I've seen that happen over and over and over again. And another one of the projects I called And Now Woman, which is a women's self-expression circle. I also do a co-ed version of it, or a multi-gender version of it. One of the women, she's in her 30s at the time, she came and presented, and she said, I haven't spoken in public since I was 5 years old, because a teacher, I felt bad. And I did something in class, and I hadn't spoken in public. And what was that, for 25 years for her, whatever it is. And she took this stage and felt renewed. And it's to be seen and heard and celebrated, because that leads to feeling connected. And when we feel connected, we're looking up, not down. Our hearts are open, not closed. We make better choices. We'll make better choices for our own selves. It's phenomenally powerful, and it's what I feel. That's what I feel called to do.
That's beautiful. The painter, I resonate with that so much. My divorce forced me to move out of the town I was a sports writer in, and when I got back to the Springfield, Missouri area where I'm at now, it was several years and I knew it deep down. I spoke it out loud several times, trying to figure out what to do with my creativity. I wanted to get back into journalism and got really close a couple of times, but something would happen. Either it was extremely low paying and I couldn't afford to invest the hours they were asking for the money that they were going to provide, or it would just fall through. Publishers would change and then they would downsize instead of expand or something like that. And I remember thinking several times how great of a platform podcasting would be. And I just didn't do it. And finally, at a super low point for myself, I was like, what do I have to lose? And launched this podcast. And the difference that has made of having the creative outlet, doing what I know that I was put here to do, it wasn't just sports writing, it was storytelling. I started looking back at my whole life, and whether it was through humorous stories in English class that was sort of getting me in trouble, but whatever.
It's good to have mischief in life, Derek.
Oh yeah. Like I said, I was definitely the class clown. I would follow the syllabus to a T, but I remember in high school, she gave us our English teacher gave us this project we would use all of the vocab words or whatever it was that we were studying. We'd have to write a story about the Salem witch trials or whatever it is. And I remember one of the little vocab stories that we had to do. There was certain aspects of the story we had to meet, the vocab words that we had to use or whatever. And I wrote a a story about the love triangle that was in the original Power Rangers between the different. And I remember she gave me a bad grade, and I wound up taking it to the principal, and I was like, can you explain to me how I didn't complete this assignment to her instructions? I remember him reading it, trying not to laugh, and then he's like, well, I see where she might be a little bit disappointed in you, but you did hit all of her requirements, so we all had to sit down, and that was the funniest thing. I remember after that point, she was just like, I have no choice but to just let him do what he wants.
Good for you. Good for you for advocating for yourself, right? You stood up for your creativity. If you had said to yourself, this is what I'm talking about with these Circus of the Heart stories, because that was a difficult moment that's funny to you now. If you had said to yourself, oh, well, I guess if I get creative, I'm not safe, and not written and stopped writing, or if you hadn't advocated for yourself, which would be another logical choice, you wouldn't have your career.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, I wound up, several times as a sports writer, even like on the serious stories. I remember having to advocate for myself to defend a story I had written. When I worked for the Waynesville Daily Guide, I wrote a story about there was a handful of coaches that were getting fired, and I'm a little bit of a stat geek as well. So I kind of had in my head, I knew what their winning percentage was, and they were all very much winning coaches, and they were always readily available to talk to me. Their players seemed to like them. And I wrote this story about these coaches and what they meant. And I found the incongruencies in the stories from the school board and all that. And I remember the publisher calling me, and he's like, that they're probably going to ban you from these schools. And they were telling me not to run it. And I I was the one man band of the sports department. So I just did it anyway and ran it. Got banned from those schools, but continued to show up. And actually one of the coaches that they hired to replace one of the gentlemen I was writing about, he was like, I read that story, and I actually wrote in there that he was not a good fit. He actually had some legal trouble that I had found, and didn't feel like he was a safe person for these kids at the time. And he was like, I read that story. I want you to know. And this is several months after. I always wondered if he had read it, because he would come up and talk to me afterwards, didn't say anything about it. But once the season was over, he was like, I respect what you did there. And, you always advocate for my kids when the award seasons come around. You reach out to me, get the statistics and everything. And he's like, I feel like you were representing our kids well. So I just want you to know that that's why I continued to talk to you. And he kind of tried to explain his legal troubles to me, which I won't get into. I don't want to drag his name through the mud again. But yeah, I never thought about that. The whole time I was just kind of defending my creative freedom there.
Well, the courage to defend your creative freedom comes from somewhere. It either comes from your inherent knowing that that's what's yours to do, or you've been encouraged to be courageous and bold, or only you can know from your story. When I think about where does it come from in me, I think that studying the arts inherently leads to people taking positive risks, because you have to be in a mindset of invention and reach for the next iteration of something. I think it's extraordinary that you can look back on your life and see point after point after point of advocating for yourself. And I do find that humor helps us reclaim being able to advocate for ourselves, because we can reframe our stories from the past through humor, and that releases energy and gives us our energy back.
Yeah, that's very true. I never thought about it in that manner, but yeah, I've always been that person that I kind of get annoyed when people take things too seriously. I don't know where that comes from. I guess just years of watching comedians in various forms, but and then probably go ahead.
Maybe comedy's choosing you.
I've got several friends that would say that. They get real mad that I've not done stand up before.
Well, if I may encourage you, consider yourself officially encouraged on this podcast. Let it be known that Derek has been officially encouraged to get behind the mic. It's funny, like you get behind the mic, but you get in front of people. And there's a reason why people watch nightly comedy shows to get the news. It's because sometimes the news is hard to look at directly and we got to put some space around it. That's like the first laugh. And just like when you were saying with your friend that you first you have a laugh and then you can talk about stuff. Yeah, you have a laugh. So you laugh with each other. You feel safe together. You release some tension because laughter is also a physical catharsis, just like tears are. I mean, if you, the greatest, you laugh until you cry and you cry until you laugh. It's physiological. So you do all those things and then you're open and free.
Yeah.
And then you can have the conversations that you need to have, whether that's on the level of a friendship or on the level of society. It's the same phenomenon.
Yeah. And a lot of my friends from around this area lean differently politically than I do. And that's one thing I've been badly wanting to find someone who can like talk about it, not scientifically, maybe the wrong word, but really want to examine this phenomenon. I am very much more progressive than this friend group, one of the friend groups I'm in. And yet I think there's something like 5 of us that will get together and we will all be talking. And as much of a political divide that we see in this country, this group of 5 friends, we will sit there and almost, like one of those night show hosts like John Oliver or something, we'll talk to each other and kind of razz each other about our beliefs, but it helps me to see the other side in a way and understand them and still appreciate their opinion on the matter as long as it's coming from a good place. And I feel like that's so needed right now. It's kind of scary out there.
I agree with you. I am passionate about the bridging movement. The people from the left, right, and center who are intentionally collaborating with each other to create cross-party dialogue right now. I am so a fan of the bridging movement. All Sides News Network published an article of mine on humor in society about how to use humor for this purpose in part. But one of the things you're saying is that the friend group that you're in is using humor to overcome your divides, which is exactly right. In my family, half of my family is very conservative and the other half of my family is very liberal. And sure, people have an opportunity to disagree with each other, but being a family is more important. Exactly. And so I will often joke that it's like, you believe that? You believe that? Well, let's make popcorn on the stove. Okay, let's make popcorn on the stove. And I love being in a family that embraces difference, where people are going to find ways to have love grow. And I'm very grateful that I have a family that has stayed together, because it's possible that a family like mine could be like, no, you're not my family anymore because XYZ. And it's like my family practices bridging, and there are organizations all over the US specifically working on bridging. And Living Room Conversations and Braver Angels are 2 of them. There's Crossing Party Lines. There's more. It's a phenomenal movement. And the more of us that can participate in bridging, the more we can realize that we want many of the same things, even if we see different paths to having them come about. And if you really get down to it, and this goes down to when I was a pediatric hospital clown, there are things that cut through everything. And my kid is in the hospital is one of them. And any amount of humor from anyone, regardless of their background, at that moment brings life. And so it's extraordinary to discover. Sometimes I'll humorously say that it's like natural disasters and health that bring people together above all things. It's like, my car is stuck in the snow. Will you shovel it out? Yes, I will. I will help you. We're in an emergency. To be able to just have, instead of it having to be something cataclysmic like that, to bring people together across their differences. What if it's just, I'm alive today and I'm fascinated by my fellow human beings, and I know that there's love at all of our core. And even if we define it differently, I know that humor can help me reach that person. even if we're going to do it differently. I know that there's artfulness that can help me reach that person. And whether that's someone we know or it's on a bigger social scale, again, these are the tools. And there's a bunch of really excellent tools put forth by those organizations to help people find each other. And humor is definitely one of them. I wrote a conversation about humor for Living Room Conversations, which has conversation guides that people use to talk about challenging things with people they either agree with or don't disagree with about how the world goes.
And talking about the willingness to help out with health or natural disasters, that's one thing, that helping another person, that has such profound effects on your mood. It's incredible. I sometimes I'm like, does no one have the self-awareness to realize how good you feel after you reach out and help someone? Like that's when I feel my absolute best. You feel like you have a place in the world because you're able to help someone.
Yes, and it's a really great way to change one's state. The other thing that helps people that is, again, underappreciated and underutilized is telling our stories that were hard then that are funny now. Because we can help other people because they can be like, oh, well, if she can do that, I can do this.
Right.
So that project is called Circus of the Heart. And I call it Circus of the Heart, partly because I have a circus background, but partly because people go to the real circus to see people do impossible things.
Yeah.
Flying Fritz can get shot out of his cannon. Well, if him and Flying Frida can then hang off the high wire in their pinky toe, which is wild that a human being could do whatever they're doing.
Right.
Maybe what can I do? Okay, I can learn to roller skate. I can ride this bike. I can take this physical risk. I can go swimming in the winter. Whatever it is. And then the emotional equivalent of impossible, it's very vital. I really encourage everyone to go to the circus. It's really important to see people do impossible things. It gives us all bravery. And the emotional equivalent of that is, can I forgive this person? It feels impossible. Can I find humor in this story? It feels impossible. And so when there's about 30 or 40 of these on my website right now, which is jesterofthepeace.com, and under the Circus of the Heart Library, people telling stories about all the things I mentioned before, everything from death to life. And once someone realizes, because I've also run this as a wellness circle where we're talking about finding the It's Funny Now stories, the Circus of the Heart stories from our own lives, and sharing them with each other. Once someone realizes that they can actually help another person by simply telling a story that was hard then that's funny now, it serves a couple of purposes. We celebrate each other's resilience. We get to know each other better. We learn things about each other we didn't know. We're laughing with each other. And everybody's heart gets a little more space, because if one person is telling their story and sharing about their first laugh and putting some space around the pain and their heart has hope, other people listening to the story will get it too. Just like you can catch stress off of someone's stress, you can catch hope from someone's hope, and you can catch resilience from someone's resilience. And this is why it's so important. And it's also a fantastic thing to do at gatherings. We just went through the holiday gatherings, absolutely excellent to find out people's It's Funny Now stories. Circus of the Heart style stories, parties, standing in line somewhere, anywhere, conferences, anywhere. Sharing those stories that were hard then that are funny now, it makes a beeline to people's shared humanity. And one of the things I've also noticed is that nobody really cares about the background of the person. The person who is finding humor about some aspect of death of a parent and finds a way to find some humor and keep going. Does anybody listening to that care about their political views? Not at all. No. It's like, oh, this is on the level of humanity. And that's what happens with Circus of the Heart stories when we find the ones that are cooked enough that they can actually help. And again, the metrics on that are, I get energy when I tell this story. I feel better when I tell the story. I might laugh or smile. You can see it in my eyes. Then you can help somebody else. And I wish everybody was walking around the world knowing how powerful it is and how easy it is to help people with these tales.
And part of what you do, I saw on your website, you're willing to go to businesses to set up Humorville.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Are you able to tell us about a couple of those stories?
Yeah, sure. I was recently in Norway at a ski resort, and the person who was a director really wanted to have the staff be able to be resilient, because at a ski resort, the stakes are really high.
Yeah.
People go there on vacation. It's super special, but there's also, it's a ski lodge. People are drinking. People are getting crazy. People are, there's so much, they're there to ski, but they're also there to seriously celebrate. And so things can go awry. And so she wanted the staff to have more resilience. And so we did the Love Letter Lounge post office project, where people wrote about what they wanted to let go, what they wanted to bring in, who they wanted to be, letters of encouragement to each other all across the staff. We also did the Circus of the Heart project, sharing stories from the past. And she shared one too. And me and my co-facilitator also did times that were hard then that are funny now, so that along the way, you can look for the humor faster. And then we played a funny game where I walked down, there's probably 70 people in the room. I walked right down the middle of the aisle and I said, okay, if I get to the end of this aisle, I've completely lost my marbles. How are you going to reroute me? And then we made up a story. We actually made up a story about what if there was a guest who'd had too much to drink. They were trying to come up with ways. Someone said, there's ice cream. I was like, no, ice cream's not going to solve the problem. and then somebody said, oh, they're staying at the hotel next door. We can take them away in a taxi. And I thought, And then it was funny. And people could see that even though it was a fictitious situation, everybody could see me totally chill out in that moment, even though we were making it up. And it's just like, how can we use humor to de-escalate a situation? And that was one of the things that we did. And then another one, also in Norway, was a company that had grown 37% in 1 year, which is an extraordinary accomplishment. And yet also very challenging, the amount of work that had to be done in order to achieve that milestone. And so we did the post office project there too, writing like, this is what was hard. This is how I grew. And what we came away with was, most people said, facing this challenge, I actually like who I'm becoming. I feel that by letting myself really go for this massive, very difficult goal, that I'm more courageous, or I'm more clear-headed, or I've developed myself, or I have these skills. And it was a way to celebrate and frame it. That's two of them. But another one is I did a wonderful event for the Tourette's Association here. And we did I Vote for You, because it was during an election year. And and the day was all about being leaders. And so we voted for everybody in the room to be president, whatever they want. People came up and gave speeches like, I have Tourette's and I am absolutely giving this speech as my full self, claiming my leadership. And it was very powerful. It was a fundraiser, but it was sweet and it was real. And it's like, and it's funny. So this is the thing. My projects are funny. They have simple designs and they're easy to join. And they're about familiar things. Nobody needs to learn what voting is. Nobody needs to learn what a post office is, or learn what marriage is. And so because I'm tapping into things that already exist in our daily lives, then that barrier to entry is down. Super simple structures that I learned from Creative Theater Unlimited, thank you, and humor. And then all the barriers to entry are really low. And so people from all walks of life will just jump in without thinking. Because if I did all these projects and I did them from a serious perspective, people hold back and they think and they wonder and they worry. What does it mean? Am I safe? If it's funny, people just join. They just start sharing. And then they can be seen, heard, and celebrated. And then they can be connected. And then we're in a different day, whether it's a different moment, a different minute, or a different life, depending on what their inner life has been preparing for before they met me on the path.
I think humor is super important at work. We spend so much of our time at our workplace and with the people in our workplace. And that I've always used humor as kind of a way to blow off steam at work, like when I'm working on projects and stuff. And I just think it's so important that they don't take themselves too seriously at work. Maybe that's just me, but it's incredible the amount of friendships I've made at work just for being that guy that people could come to and kind of vent about work, and I just spin it into something humorous, and you see him kind of go off with a renewed energy to finish out the work day. I can't imagine how much that must help those businesses that you bring Humorville to.
Thank you for that. I deeply know, and it's beyond believing. I deeply know that I will say humor is life, and I say that because humor brings energy. Anything that brings energy is life, brings life, and so I will say humor brings life. Humor is life. Humor is a spiritual practice. Humor is a life path. If someone's atheist, humor is wellness. Humor is a human right. Humor is all the good things when we're laughing with each other, because it can also be the opposite of all those things if we're laughing at each other. But and that's one of the great paradoxes. That's one of the great paradoxes of humor. And so part of the skill is, let me become an expert in laughing with others. And how much love am I going to create? How much freedom? How much joy? How much connection? How much wellness if I become an expert? And so we're at the beginning of the year right now. I'm encouraging everyone listening, whether you're listening now at the beginning of the year or down the road, to walk with humor. May we all walk with humor. May we understand the wonderfully, ridiculously deep responsibility of walking with humor, and have it be part of our everyday, and have it be part of our everyday love.
How can people connect with you or bring Humorville to their business?
So the best way to do that is to go to jesterofthepeace.com, jesterofthepeace. Jesterofthepeace.com is where my calendar is. It's where all the programs are. It's where I give all the talks that I give. I also keynote on humor as a human right, and humor for wellness, and humor for workplaces. That's the best place. And then from there, my phone number is there, my email is there. Lots and lots and lots of pictures are there. And it's possible also to deep dive, like, why is this important? Why are we doing this?
Well, thank you for coming on and sharing some stories and some laughs with us on the Show My Scars podcast. I greatly appreciate you, and I'm super happy that we met.
Me too, Derek. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I will say to you too, because I know that your heart understands it and your mind and your conscience understand it, may you walk with humor.